Hi, I'm Grady Colleen, and welcome to the CapeCod.com News Center. I'm joined today by a special guest who's going to be talking to us about pirates. Do you mind introducing yourself for our listeners?
Me? Now? Sure. My name's Buck Kinnear, indeed. That's me. I'm actually the one heading up the Cape Cod Pirate Festival. You've probably seen me picture all over town. I'm like everywhere. They got me plastered on everything nowadays. Indeed. But my real name is Chris Schultz, actually. I'm the producer of the festival.
Well, thank you very much, both Buck and Chris, for joining me for this conversation today. It's going to be an interesting one. Of course, as you already mentioned, the festival's coming up for this upcoming weekend as well as the next. So if you can't make it to one, you can make it to the other, hopefully. But I wanted to ask you a lot about basically what can people expect. It's going to be a family interesting adventure. And talk to you a little bit about being a performer and event organizer, especially over the past few years involving COVID and some of the stuff you've also been doing. So it's a general overview, but first things first, do you mind telling us a little bit more about the festival? What is there for people who are interested and are thinking about taking their family this weekend?
Sure, indeed. I'll tell you as Buck, because that's the best way to share it. But we got 2 weekends of family fun adventure for the families and for the older folks as well. And for young couples, we got a pub at Old Tom's Tavern with the girls from the Harlot Queens is the name of the group. And they come in and they turn it into a Ellen Stardust Diner meets Coyote Ugly. They're going to be singing songs and dancing and having a grand old time. And we have a Kids Cove this year that features STEM-inspired activities from the Cape Cod Maritime Museum. And, of course, lots of old favorites. Lots of our musicians like the Plank Walkers and Merlin Mischief and some new folks as well. Magic, aerial acts, just fun for everybody, really. And food, lots of food. And drink. Lots of drink, too.
All right, a little bit of grog, or is that going to be something for the evening after?
Well, if you can mix up some grog, you go right ahead. But we got beer, we got wine, we got cider, we got pirate water, they call it. That's another fun one. But we got plenty of good stuff.
That is awesome. So lots of interesting stuff. And you mentioned a lot of performers, a lot of interaction as well. Is there going to be other people doing people, I don't want to say in character and be insulting, but is there going to be other pirates there for people interested?
Well, I got to say, honestly, to say it's in character is fair. I'm going to take off the hat and come and talk to you as Chris for now. But yeah, no, we're actually really proud of what we've been able to do in the community. We have a community of local performers that have been rehearsing for many, many weeks. They're going to be performing pirate pub sing-along. They're going to be performing a couple of small scenes throughout the day. They'll be doing a lot of interacting. So we've got a nice village of pirates. The village that they live in is called the Moist Tortugas, not to be confused with the Dry Tortugas. And that actually translates into damp turtle, just so you know. But it's fun, and they have a lot of fun interacting and playing their characters. And at the same time, we've brought in some regional acts, folks who do this professionally for a living, professional pirates, professional touring variety performers from the Renaissance and pirate circuit. So musicians coming from, I think the farthest we've got coming this year is coming from Detroit, which is interesting because you don't usually think of Detroit and pirates, but they're coming out, and we've got aerial acts, magicians, a storyteller. We have an author who's doing a book signing and a conversation with the audience, talking specifically about the history of piracy in the area. She's written a novel that is a historically based novel that sort of embellishes the story of Sam Bellamy and Maria Hallett. So we've got some really interesting things happening for all different ages at all different times of the day. And you can come and enjoy the performances, or you can come and drink, and you can come and shop, and you can come and relax and put on a costume and get your pirate on and just have a good time.
That was going to be the next question, was if people are able to come in as maybe enjoying the atmosphere a little bit, want to dress up, especially maybe some kids who are trying to get into it and have a good time of it. So that's awesome to hear.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun to see people how invested they can get into the program. The closest thing I can compare it to is if you've ever been to a Renaissance festival, it's very similar in theme and in feel, just with a pirate twist.
Sure.
In fact, often when you go to a Renaissance fair, you'll see a lot of people dressed as pirates. This is, the opposite. So we have a lot of folks who come and they take a great deal of pride in their costuming and they want to show it off. It gives them an opportunity to kind of interact and play and escape a little bit. And that's one of the things I think that the festival does really nicely, is it provides people with an escape from reality for a few hours. Just go out and play and have some fun. And you can do it with your kids. You can do it with your best friends. You can do it over a pint. You can do it over some axe throwing. There's just so much stuff that you can do and just kind of forget the rest of the world for a little while.
Yeah, that's awesome. So it's this is something that is also kind of culturally relevant for the Cape and Islands region. We've had a couple of other guests, especially Casey Sherman, who's local author, nationally acclaimed, who's very invested in the piracy of the region. We know Nantucket is quite proud of their whaling heritage, essentially, or at least acknowledges it. Obviously, whaling has not aged well in the cultural eye, but piracy's got that kind of romantic flair to it that I don't really see people talk about a ton on Cape, but there is some acknowledgement of it. We have the Witta Pirate Museum as well as the Witta Wreck just off the shore. Do you think that this is an opportunity to kind of like bring that to the surface a little bit more as well?
Well, for sure. I mean, I do a number of different events in the region, and I'm trying to develop some more, but to be honest with you, the reason I chose the Pirate Festival in Yaaaarmouth is because you could only do a Pirate Festival in Yaaaarmouth. Anything else just doesn't fit.
It's got Yar in the name.
Exactly. In fact, even on our posters, it says our event is in Yaaaarmouth. But the area, the history, I mean, there's an area in Yaaaarmouth they call the Pirate Mile that has the museum, that has a number of different mini golf courses that are pirate themed. And the fact is there's a lot of history out there. One of the most notorious pirates in history used to drop anchor just off the shore of Yaaaarmouth, not far out on a small island. His name was Ned Lowe. He was known for being a horrible, horrible person. You think of pirates, you think, oh, well, they're terrible. Well, this is the sort of guy that other pirates said, oh, no, stay away from him. He's bad news. He used to sail with Charles Vane, and there were a lot of folks who were not the nicest folks, and that's saying a lot for a pirate. But this area in general, the Mid Cape region and the Outer Cape region specifically had a particular affinity for pirates. It was easy to get in. It was easy to get out. You could drop anchor here. You could have connections that reminded you of home, but it was also away from everything. You didn't want to go to Boston because Boston didn't tolerate pirates. You'd have the Mather family was notorious for persecuting the pirates, and pirates would be hanged and would be gibbeted out in Boston Harbor frequently. But here on Cape, it was fine. It was a safe place for them to go. I mean, it was not saying that they were completely scot-free, but it was fairly safe to assume that if you dropped anchor in town, people weren't really asking a whole lot of questions. They were more happy to sell you a meal and see what they could get off of you and let you stay for a few days before you sailed off again.
Always been welcoming here on Cape Cod is what I'm gathering from the historical aspect of always been welcoming to visitors of all kinds.
Absolutely. I mean, it's always been a haven for tourism. And even then, the ships would back up on Route 6 for miles.
And this is also during the bridge time as well. It's crazy. The bridges were actually here when the Pilgrims arrived, is my understanding. No,
it's true. It's true.
The jokes aside, it's very interesting. You got a lot of historical aspects to it as well. Of course, you did come in today in costume. Just for our people who might be listening only, we do have the video online on CapeCod.com. We do have a link there if you want to see Chris in his lovely getup. But it's very I don't want to say elaborate, but that's where did you get this? Was this made yourself? How did you get this together?
eBay.
Well, it's well done.
No, I do take a lot of pride in the costume. A lot of it are pieces that I picked up over the years, just as I've gone along. Costuming that I've had from different jobs that I've had, different gigs. I like finding different pieces and adding them to it because one, costume pieces can be very expensive and trying to go out and buy something off the rack can be pricey.
It's more authentic this way as well.
I think so. But we get a lot of little pieces here and I try to keep it fairly historically accurate. But,
I see.
But there are definitely some anachronisms. I mean, anytime you see a pirate with a tricorn, that's pretty much what people expect. It's also technically, historically not correct.
Really? Is the tricorn older? The three-pointed, familiar felt folded up hat, is that older or newer than pirates? Newer.
Most pirates would have a round-brimmed hat with a side up, and that was usually in the early 1600s, or the early 1700s is what you would see, the late 1600s. The tricorn has become synonymous with the American Revolution pretty much because it was only popular during the decade before and the decade after. So for about 20 to 30 years is when you'd see the tricorns. I mean, there were pirates who wore them, but not your traditional pirates, not your Blackbeards.
Not the age of piracy.
No, not the age of piracy. But there's a certain expectation, and I've always found that playing into the fantasy helps you to pass on the history.
Mm-hmm.
So if you touch on and you tie into something that people are familiar with and they can connect with, it gives you something. It gives you access to then pass on some of the more historical or the more truthful information, and there's value in that, and people can have a little bit of a takeaway.
Mm-hmm. That's really interesting. Actually, I did want to ask a little bit about there's so many times where people, especially in the movie industry, are like, we know that this is wrong, but it would feel weirder if we didn't do it. It would be weirder if we didn't have pirates with XYZ or Vikings that are in the full biker gear for some reason, as if they wore
horns on their hats.
On their hats and stuff. Yeah, Vikings did not wear horned hats, as it turned out. But that's very interesting to note. So it's interesting to see that you've brought a lot of this historical atmosphere to it and clearly taking some pride in it. Do you mind talking a little bit about some of the other experiences that you have from an organizer of these events? You mentioned some stuff that you were considering for the future, but what have you done in the past? What else are you bringing to this in terms of experience with organizing these big events?
Sure. Well, it's definitely a labor of love, and it's definitely a learning experience every time. Whenever I walk into these, there's always a bit of imposter syndrome. It's like, oh, what have I got to do? What did I forget? What's left to do? As soon as I leave here, I'm going back to the field. I'm changing my clothes. I'm going to be swinging a hammer and putting up walls. So I mean, it's definitely a labor of love, but it can be a lot of fun. It can be very rewarding when you execute one of these themed events, which is different from other types of events that you might go to. Mm-hmm. Just talking about that, like Barnstable County Fair, one of my favorite places to go, tends to draw a lot of people who are, regional, Cape and maybe over the bridge and such. Busy, exciting. They bring in some folks from outside as performers or exhibitors, but most of the attendees are local. The Wellfleet Oyster Fest, you'll get some people who come in from off Cape, but most of it's a local flair. Seaside Festival is another one.
Mm-hmm.
These are great events, and I love going to them myself, but I'm local. The themed events tend to appeal to a broader niche. Well, broader is not really the right term, but a niche audience. There are a lot of local folks who come to our event, but we also have people who, because they like these themed events, because they like dressing up and they like the history and the law and the lore and the romance of piracy, will travel from New Jersey for a weekend for the festival. New York, we've got many visitors who come in. We get visitors who drive down from Maine. We have day trippers who come in from New Hampshire and from Vermont and from Connecticut just to participate in the themed event. And these are people who normally would not be coming to the Cape. And that's really appealing when we're doing these types of themed events. You had asked about other events that I do. So there's this one right now, and I do another event I do on Cape Cod is called Dickens of a Christmas. We launched that last year in partnership with the Harwich Chamber of Commerce. And it was an experiment that paid off incredibly well. It was an immersive Christmas carol where we took Main Street in Harwich Center, and we took geographic locations and buildings, and we turned them into locations from A Christmas Carol. We took a portion of the Brooks Library and turned that into Scrooge's bedroom. We took the Pilgrim Lodge, the Masonic Lodge there, and that was Scrooge's counting house and also Fezziwig's room, so Fezziwig's house. We had the porch of the Albro House, which is just outside of Town Hall. We turned that into the Cratchit's kitchen, so you could stand outside and watch and you see. And the audience had the opportunity to follow these characters through the action. And you didn't just have, most people wanted to focus on Scrooge because that's where the narrative goes. But the scenes started before Scrooge would arrive, and they'd continue after Scrooge left. And you could watch these other characters and see them interact and see their interplay. And it was really exciting to see. And we're going to be expanding it this year to 2 weekends, the first 2 weekends of December. We're going to be adding in other Dickensian characters. We're adding I don't know if I can talk about this yet or not.
Is it a spoiler? Will we have
it's not a spoiler. It's just not official. But we have
an Oliver Twist kind of maybe showing up in the middle of.
I've hired a professional pickpocketer
okay.
who is going to play Fagin, and I'm going to have Artful Dodger and Oliver Twist with them. So they'll be going around doing street magic with folks. We're planning on hosting a spectral tea party, which is going to be a party with the ghosts. And it's going to be a little tea party / seance with the ghosts of Christmas past, present, and future. And it'll be family focused and try and show the younger children who are there, they get to participate in a tea party, and they don't have to be afraid of these characters when they see them in the story itself. We'd love to launch a Miss Havisham's fish finishing school. So there's lots of different things that we're looking to do and add and make this grow and really turn it into a true Dickensian street festival during the Christmas season, which this area doesn't have anything like that. So it's something new. I produced the Jewelry City Steampunk Festival out in Attleboro, which is a lot of fun. And that's another completely different genre type audience. And they come out into an area which is economically challenged and provide a much needed boost to the economy during the days that we're there. And I'm currently developing some other projects. I'd love to do a Renaissance Fair on Cape Cod. The biggest project I want to do right now is a Sleepy Hollow themed event. It's just a matter of finding the location and finding the right sponsors to help promote that.
Very interesting. Well, for those who might be listening and might be interested in a Sleepy Hollow event, we know who to call. But I assume October, kind of interesting stuff. We've been seeing an expansion to the shoulder season. We've had Love Live Locals, Amanda Converse, come in, and she's talked about how it's like we'd have summer, and then we'd have like maybe that second summer kind of thing around December, people coming in. You've already talked about the Dickens event that kind of takes advantage of that. But now we just have people staying through September, November. Like summer event is now like really expanding those shoulder seasons. So yeah, you think that there's also opportunity there essentially for Halloween time?
I do. Definitely for Halloween time, because there's really nothing in this region that is family friendly, Halloween focused. I mean, there are some smaller activities, and I don't want to take away from the folks who do some activities that are family oriented, but there's nothing really that is big that is both a regional and a tourism draw in this area for Halloween. And that's my focus, is to try and build something that will not only be pleasant for locals to attend and be family friendly. I mean, it'll be creepy, it'll be spooky, but it'll be family friendly. It won't be like one of these horror houses that they do. But it'll also draw people in from off Cape and hopefully add some tourism dollars to the economy at a time that typically we don't see a lot of business. I mean, it's busy, but it's not busy.
It's not Memorial Day weekend.
No.
It's not 4th of July.
I mean, that's one of the reasons why I picked these weekends specifically for the Pirate Festival, was because I wanted to try and help support my community and drive numbers in the region at a time when, like you just mentioned, Memorial Day weekend. We had a great Memorial Day weekend. It was so busy, and now it's quiet. And it's going to be quiet for the next couple of weeks until 4th of July. And then it'll be high season. But there's this little lull in between those. And the main reason I have the Pirate Festival where it is because I want to be able to try and draw more people into town, draw more people into the community, and have them spend money and support the businesses around us.
You mentioned some of the economic impact as well. I don't want to quiz you on data figures, but do you have a rough estimate of like hotel rooms or something like that you guys bring in?
I do. I have to have those at my fingertips most of the time, so it's certainly not a quiz. No, last year we accounted for 250 hotel room nights in the area. 24 of those were rooms that we purchased for our traveling performers and such. The rest were people who came down and made a weekend of it and responded to our surveys and said, yeah, they were not planning on coming down, or they purchased a room specifically because they were coming down for the event. We accounted for about 2,400 meals that were sold at local restaurants. Now, some of those, granted, were probably fast food, but plenty of those were sit-downs as well. We accounted for 200 stops at concession store or convenience stores rather, for gas and snacks. My favorite statistic is we accounted for over 1,000 ice cream cones that were sold.
How do you collect the data, the cone data for that?
We use accurate statistical modeling. We send surveys out to the folks who have attended our event, and based on their responses, we can project what sort of sales we had, and we've got enough of a sampling of our audience who respond that our numbers are pretty accurate, and they've been consistent year over year. We've seen both an increase in attendance and an increase in the impact to the community as well.
Very interesting stuff, and it's great to hear. As well, I wanted to kind of get your read as an event organizer, as a performer. You mentioned kind of like time in terms of how things have been getting better, which is awesome. But we do have that like a 2-year window of COVID-19. So as a performer, as an event organizer, I kind of wanted to ask, like, what was going on during that time for you? And how did eventually you end up with the Pirate Festival that we have now? Obviously, things are going well, but like, I'm sure it was a bit touch and go there for a minute.
Yeah, so I started out with a legitimate job at the beginning of COVID, where I would get up and make my coffee and send the kids to school and go into work and do that. And then COVID hit, and I was one of those people who was downsized. And at the time, I was also working as the artistic director for a theater company, Eventide Theater Company in Dennis, and was also performing in a show at the Cotuit Center for the Arts. And right about that time is when the world just shut down. All the shows were canceled. And the shows that I was helping to produce over at Eventide and the show that I was in over at Cotuit, we were a week away from opening day, and everything just shut down. And it was scary. I mean, I think there's a sort of a collective amnesia, whereas unless we stop and really reflect on it, we forget just how scary that was. And for somebody who was involved working with a lot of nonprofits, I saw it was equally scary. It wasn't just a matter of fear of health. It was also fear of organizational survival. These shows are being canceled. Those shows are part of what drives the revenues for these small nonprofits. They're not in it to make money. They're in it to break even. And, it was very, very difficult. So there were a lot of challenges. So I started dabbling with online presentations and trying to do some online outreach with Eventide Theater. And I'm actually really proud to say that we were the first theater in the region that produced a virtual play. We had a playwriting competition that was going to be doing a live reading, the Kaplan competition, and that was canceled, and we had actors ready. And I said, well, let's try doing this on Zoom. So we did. And it was phenomenally successful. So we launched a bunch of programs that were strictly online only sort of participation pieces to keep the name of the theater out there, to keep it engaged. And that was when I realized, I've got a modicum of technical proficiency, and we were doing some creative stuff. And there are other organizations out there that were probably struggling with similar issues. So I started a small company with the focus of being able to serve nonprofits and being able to serve small businesses with online meeting services, online events, online entertainment. We did virtual murder mysteries, which were really cool. And they were a lot of fun. And these are the sort of things that if a company were to Google it online, thousands and thousands of dollars, $10, $15, $20,000 for some companies that say, oh, we'll produce your online meeting or your online conference. And that's a prohibitive price point for a small organization. So I would come in, and I would come in at a much lower price. I do a lot of the work myself. Part of it was a labor of love, but part of it was, looking to maintain some livelihood, and I would do it for $3,000 or $4,000, which is significantly less. Now, are you getting the best bells and whistles of one of those $20,000 companies? No, but if you're having a small meeting, you don't need waiting rooms and conference rooms. You need the basics, but you need someone to manage it and who knows how to work them. And that's what I offered. So I did that for a while. And then events started happening. People started going out again. The vaccine was out, but people were still afraid to go into theaters or closed buildings. And, I spoke with some friends of mine, and I had done a lot of performance work in the past at Renaissance fairs, and I had helped run one. And basically I had friends who said, why don't you do something on Cape Cod? And I thought, wow, there's really not, I couldn't think of a more perfect solution, because here's an opportunity for artists to perform, for actors to go out and do something, but it's also outdoors in open air. People can social distance if they want. People can wear masks. It was right about the time when people were like, do we, don't we, do we have to anymore? So we would ask people would social distance and wear masks, please. Our performers were wearing masks when they were not performing, but it was an opportunity to do something that people had not seen for 2 years. And it just grew from that. It turned into, that was a successful event. It's been steadily increasing, and I'm adding other activities to try and expand my portfolio and do some more, like the two we talked about, and the newer events that I'm looking at trying to mount. And it's really turned into sort of a small little niche industry that is it's keeping me afloat. I'm certainly not getting wealthy from it, but I enjoy what I do, and I make people happy with what I do. It's kind of like, I have a friend of mine who at one point said they were looking for a career change, and they decided to go into making ice cream. And I said, well, that's interesting. Why would you go from property management to ice cream? And he said, nobody ever goes out and gets ice cream and is in a bad mood. And I'm like, okay. All right, I'll go with that. And I'd say that's the same thing with this. Putting on these events, putting on a pirate festival. Nobody comes to a pirate festival in a bad mood. Everybody wants to have fun and have a good time. And that's one of the things I really love about what I'm doing is people get to come in, and for all the logistical nightmares that sometimes go with it, being able to see young couples having a wonderful weekend, having a date, having grandparents come out with their kids and just having a blast and playing pirate. It's just very rewarding at the end of the day to see that.
Mm-hmm. That is awesome. We're about coming up on time, but you kind of mentioned some of the the labors of love that go into it. Can I ask you, what is some of the biggest, what's the number one biggest challenge or whatever that goes into maybe organizing this event? Is it getting the vendors contracted, or is it just the hard labor? You said you have to swing a hammer right after this.
I would say that the biggest challenge is actually something you're helping us with today, is getting the word out about the event. Obviously I could say, well, we need more money, or we need more time, or we need more opportunities to grow. But that really comes from just being able to create the awareness. With the awareness comes people buying tickets, comes people sponsoring the event, comes local support. And that really is just hugely helpful. In this day and age, there's so much media out there that in the old days, and for anybody who's young who's listening to this, I apologize, but I remember when there were 3 networks, not 4, and you used to have to turn the knob to change the channel. And if you wanted to play a video game, you had to put it on 3 and flip the switch in the back, and that guaranteed somebody's listening to this going, "What is he talking about?" But it was much easier to get the word out in those days. Now there are so many different venues and channels through which people get their information that you have to be broadcasting on everything. I have been doing this for 4 years now, and I still have people who come up and go, "I never knew there was a pirate festival. I didn't know." Billboards, radio ads, signage, online presence, Facebook, Instagram, and people still are like, "I had no idea." So it's creating that awareness of an event and creating a sense of community around it that I think has been probably our biggest challenge, and when we accomplish it, probably the biggest reward.
Well, that is awesome. And speaking of, before we wrap up, do you mind telling people more about where they can learn more about this event, sign up, grab some tickets?
Absolutely. So you can visit our website, which is capecodpiratefest.com. We do sell tickets at the gate. The event itself is going to be in the Joshua Sears Field, which is directly across from the Yaaaarmouth Town Hall. If you're not familiar with that, it's the same field the Seaside Festival is held in. Tickets are $19 for adults and $15 for kids, which frankly is what you'd spend at the movies nowadays. But you get a day's worth of entertainment out of it. And we're the first 2 weekends in June from 10:30 a.m. to 5:30 p.m.
All right, awesome. And just to clarify as well, so do I have to register ahead of time, or can I go and get a ticket at the door?
Nope, absolutely. Come get your tickets at the door if you want. It's easier if you purchase them online. You can just get right in. But we are selling tickets on the day of, and if you do purchase tickets online, they're good for any day. You're not specifically locked into a day for them.
All right, awesome, Chris. Thank you so much for joining me for this conversation. It has been a pleasure.
Thank you. Likewise.
I'm Rudy Collane in the CapeCod.com News Center, and thank you for listening.